So welcome to this conversation. Today we are delighted to have Dr. Harvey Kwiyani coming in from the Church Mission Society. It's a great joy. He's been here in Nairobi launching his book, Decolonizing Mission, through a symposium that was hosted by St. Paul's University in conjunction with Park University. Welcome, Harvey.
Thank you so much. So great to be here.
How do you enjoy Nairobi?
Nairobi is always fun. I'm always looking forward to coming back to Nairobi. It's a good place. I love it. I love the weather. I love the sun. At this point in time in Liverpool, where I live, it's really cold. So coming here, enjoying the sun, enjoying the weather, it's just been beautiful.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you.
We're great to have you. What compelled you to write Decolonizing Mission?
Decolonizing Mission comes out of a place in my own journey, my academic journey, that has been informed first by the realization of the fact that Christianity is now a worldwide religion. The center of gravity for Christianity is in Africa at the moment. Africa has more Christians than any other continent. And I realized that with that, mission is going to shift as well. The center of gravity of mission is going to shift to the global south, to Africa, in a generation or two from now. And so how do we then, as African Christians living in the continent, how do we embrace mission, and how do we find ways to engage in mission, not only in Africa, but around the world? Because pretty soon we will be the people that are leading the missionary movement of the world.
Oh.
So there is that. But when we look at that, we realize also that if Africans are going to do this, they cannot do it the way Europeans have done it. Europeans have had their missionary movement tied to empires, whether it's the British Empire. There's a good reason why the greatest mission of the greatest century of Christian mission coincided with the British Empire.
Yeah.
Right. And now we are living in what some people would call the American Empire, and there's a lot of mission influence coming from America. The Africans will not have those imperial powers to back them up as they engage in mission. So we have to figure out how to do mission differently. And to do that well, we need actually to decolonize the thing. We need to rethink. We need to decolonize mission.
Wow.
So that's what drives me to write the book. I'm also informed really by the Gospels, by the New Testament, that what Jesus does is in a context of empire. But he, for his mission, as he works with his disciples, he does not use the empire at all. If anything, everything he does is geared towards subverting the empire. That his mission, what he declares in Luke 4, is about subverting empire, bring good news to the poor, setting captives free. Those are things that you do to people who have been oppressed by empires. And so it is my argument that if we decolonize mission, try to do mission in a way that makes sense to Africans, we can really learn a lot from the New Testament.
Yeah.
That shows us that mission can be done without empires.
And for instance, like now for us here thinking about this conversation, what are some of the most visible, like 2-3 things where where we see the colonization of mission that is really evidence to the eye?
I think the easiest thing that we see is the potential in the simple migration of African Christians as they move around the continent, as they go around the world and carry the gospel with them and share the good news with people wherever they go. I was in Minneapolis 2 years ago. I met a pastor from Burundi who is leading a church in Minneapolis, at the same time leading a charity focused on helping refugees get settled in the United States. he had spent 19 years at Kakuma refugee camp here in Kenya.
Oh, really?
Right. And he told me of the reality that in those 19 years, he had seen so many Christians come into the camp and be relocated around the world. He would tell me about his friends with whom he had lived in the camp now serving churches in Ohio, in California, in Texas. There is just this scattering of the African church that if we are going to do mission the way we have always done with mission agencies, this one will not count. But when we decolonize it and begin to realize that actually, just as Jesus does with the disciples, as you go make disciples for Christ, these Africans, African refugees, Christians, and this could be the Congolese in Germany, for example, or the Burundis in the United States, and everywhere else in the world, the Sudanese in Australia. They are engaging in God's mission around the world. They don't count because they don't really come through the mission agencies. They are not counted in the data as missionaries. But what they're doing is mission. And that's one of the things that we would need to appreciate when we decolonize mission.
Well, that's very interesting. And trying to think about how would you help now the church leaders and the leaders of different Christian missions in Africa appreciate this to be really a priority issue? How does your book respond to that in terms of what could they expect to find when they read the book in terms of understanding the priority of this issue in the whole scheme of their strategy of missions?
I think one of the key things that I argue in the book is that mission does not depend on imperial powers. It doesn't need empire's money. It can be simplified as something that Christians do as they move up and down the world. As simple as that. And when we look back at church history, this is how Christianity has spread around the world. Mission agencies are 200 years old. Right? I work for Church Mission Society. Church Mission Society started in 1799, 227 years ago. Right? The gospel has been moving around the world for 2,000 years. And it's not been mission agencies. It's just been migrant Christians. This is something that Jehu Hansils really articulates in his two books. The first one, Beyond Christendom, and the second one is The Making of World Christianity, or something like that. Migration and the Making of World Christianity. And he's making a very clear argument. Christianity has spread around the world largely because of the migration of Christians. Now it's the African Christians being scattered around the world. And they take the gospel with them wherever they go. A good example would be the Redeemed Christian Church of God from Nigeria. Started in 1952. Now, today, present in every country in the world. The Redeemed Christian Church of God has not sent missionaries like a mission agency would, but their members have just been scattered for various reasons. Education, jobs, some are seeking asylum. But for various reasons, they've been scattered around the world. And because they're being scattered as Christians, bringing their faith, bringing their Bibles with them, they are bringing Christian witness in every country of the world. Right? So the scattering of the African church is something that we need to pay attention to. I know we tend to complain about brain drain and all these things. But really, possibly, there's a hand of God in this. I joke that when we look back at the history of Africa, during the colonial era especially, Africa was called the Dark Continent. And possibly, God hid something in this dark continent that's now bringing light to the rest of the world. Right? And so let's pay attention to what God is doing in the scattering of the African church. It is going to be one of the most powerful missionary movements of our generation.
Wow. Someone may ask, why should I listen to Harvey on this story? Who is Harvey? Where are you coming from? And how does this story of decolonizing mission connect with you at a personal level?
Good one. Yeah, I come from Malawi. I come from a place in Malawi that's quite important in Malawi's history. It's called Magomero. It's in southern Malawi. It's in between two cities in Malawi, Zomba and Blantyre. Those are two key cities in southern Malawi. Magomero happens to be the place where David Livingstone, back in 1861, brought the first missionaries to Central Africa. These were missionaries of the university's mission to Central Africa that had emerged out of his fellow in England in 1857, when he persuaded mostly university students from Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, and later Dublin University. Those four universities joined together, put a group of young university graduates and sent them as missionaries to Central Africa. And David Livingstone would then lead them to Magomero, which is where I was born, which is where my father was born, which is where my grandfather was born. This has been our home for a long time.
Wow.
Now, my people are proud of the fact that they are the first people to receive the gospel in that part of the world. But the university's mission to Central Africa stayed at Magomero for only 3 years. They left Magomero really because Magomero was on a slave trade route, and slave traders would always disrupt their missionary work, and the missionaries in the end felt like they are spending more time serving people from slave traders than evangelizing them. So they left, came to Zanzibar on the Indian Ocean, and then they would come back to Malawi in the 1870s, 15 years later. But the land that was given to the missionaries in 1861 became the center of a huge estate that was purchased by David Livingstone's daughter, Agnes, in 1891, 1892. And so it would be this place known as the Alexander Bruce Estates.
Okay.
Alexander, so let me explain that a little. Agnes Livingstone's marriage to Alexander Law Bruce. Agnes Livingstone, the Livingstones are from Glasgow. Alexander Law Bruce is from Edinburgh. So they get married. She would have two sons. The older one was Alexander Livingstone Bruce. And he's the one who would then come to Malawi to manage the estate a little later when he grows up.
How big is his estate?
Oh, this was around 170 hectares.
Oh,
170,000 hectares.
Ooh.
It was a large piece of land. At the center of that land was the old mission station.
Okay.
All right. And so...
So, pause. Land issues here in Africa
Yes.
are a big issue. So how did they come to acquire the estate? What's the story about the acquisition of the estate? Was it a land purchase?
It's a purchase,
Okay.
but it's a purchase in the context of the Scramble for Africa. Berlin Conference had just happened 6 years earlier. And so it's now clear that a lot of Europeans are going to come to Africa to manage the colonies, right? And so the Livingstones take advantage of that. And as Malawi is becoming a British protectorate in 1891, the Livingstones are buying this land. And so they would be the largest colonial landowners in Malawi for the entire time. And that gave them a lot of power. The government could not really do anything without consulting the Livingstones.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And so they build this estate. They're trying to plant coffee. Trying to plant tang oil and a few other things, but they never really make profit. And therefore, they persuade the government to put in a law that would require locals around the estate to provide free labor to the estate. Locals around the estate would be required to work in their own farms for 3 weeks in a month, and 1 week they come and work for free at the Livingstone's estate. And this happened in many of the white estates in Malawi. The system was called Tangata system, which the word Tangata means help. Of course, this is not helping, but that's what it was sold as to the people. You're helping the white farmers around the area because when the farms do well, you benefit, right? And because they struggled to make profit, they often had to resort to violence against the locals. So this estate would be very, very, very violent. The locals, the Livingstone who managed it before Alexander came, his name is William Livingstone. He would often get into fights with people. I think when I read the history, he would beat people up a few times, leaving them for dead. And this is just because he's white, he feels he's superior, so he can do anything with the locals. And so this land that had been the mission station, 30 years later, becomes a very, very violent piece of land against the locals. You could not build a church around the estate. The Livingstones did not want Christians around the estate. And you could not build a school around the estate. They did not want locals educated. Educated locals are difficult to colonize. And Christian locals are difficult to colonize. So if anybody built a church around the estate, the Livingstones would come and burn it down. If you built a school around the estate, the Livingstones would come and burn it down.
Where is that history written? This is very strange, especially for me, the fact that I'm not familiar with that part and that history of the Livingstones.
Yeah, we as locals, we know the story. But David Livingstone is a missionary hero. So a great deal of this history has been sort of washed away. And so we really, when we read David Livingstone's biographies, we read of a missionary hero who probably is never to be seen in
a bad light.
That's right. But actually, when we read those biographies, we realize that he was quite vocal in inviting the British government to establish colonies in Africa long before Berlin Conference. Right. So David Livingstone pleaded with the British government, we need colonies here. And in his thinking, we need colonies because this is the only way we can civilize the Africans. Right? And so whether it's stopping slave trade or giving the Africans a new form of trade to replace slave trade, or even simply Christianizing them, the only way this is going to happen is if the British are in control. Right? And so he pleaded with the British government to have colonies, whether it's Malawi, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia. A great deal of the thinking behind it comes from David Livingstone. Right? And now I think the challenge, and this is one of the things that Decolonizing Mission does. Look at that history, and look at it from an African perspective. And you begin to see there's some history that's been written by Westerners over the decades, over the centuries. You begin to see the stories they left out. Right? You begin to see the gaps in the stories, and you realize actually something happened here that they could not write about. The entire Livingstone Bruce estate in Malawi story, quite a big story in Malawi, right? And it's big partly because in 1915, after the locals were fed up with what the Livingstone boys were doing, there was an uprising. Right? And this is my home. This is the story of my people. This is the story of my ancestors, right? And there was an uprising. The locals decided, we can't handle this anymore. So they came and killed one of the Livingstones.
I think I've read that where you have a Baptist pastor who...
Yes. So that uprising was led by a Baptist pastor.
This is happening in Magomero.
Yes. When I grew up at Magomero as a kid playing football, one of our football grounds was right next to where William Livingstone was buried. Right, so when I show this on slides, I have a picture of William Livingstone's grave. I played around that thing without knowing the historical significance up until later. Then I realized actually there's a lot of history here.
So, and how did you get to move now to live in Britain? Could you give us a little bit of your journey, that being your history, and then how do you then move and live with the British?
That's a good one. So I think because I grew up with the mission history among my people, hearing about the UMCA and hearing about the Livingstone's family, I grew up with an awareness of mission history, and also colonialism, because my people were right at the forefront of both those things, right?
So you were able to see both sides of the narrative. Okay.
Among my people, in my own family, right? You cannot tell that story without mentioning names of my great-grandparents. Right?
By the way, tell us about you write in your book about your great-grandfather, Nacho?
Yes. My great-great-grandfather, Ntima Wanzako Nacho, met the missionaries in the early 1880s when he was around 10 years old. The way the story has been written, and this history you can't find in Malawi, you find it in Edinburgh, right? You find it in Scotland. You cannot access it anywhere in Malawi. I have to go to the archives of the University of Edinburgh to learn this history. At the age of 10, slave traders come into the village, and this is around 1880. The way the story has been written, possibly Nacho's parents were taken by slave traders. And so Nacho, at 10, runs away. And he escapes, and with a friend, they make a long trip of probably 200 miles on foot to Blantyre, where they meet the missionaries. Right, so they become the young boys around the mission station.
Now, is this the same Livingstone mission station?
Now, this is a Blantyre mission. It's so the UMCA abandoned Magomero in 1863, 1864.
Okay.
When they came back, the UMCA went to Lake Malawi. But Def Livingstone died in 1873. Right after his death, there was a rush in Scotland for people to come to Africa to continue Livingstone's work. So in Malawi, we end up with Blantyre Mission in the south and Livingstonia Mission, named after Livingstone, in the north.
Okay.
And so Nacho goes to Blantyre Mission in the south. And that's become the center around which the city of Blantyre has been built. Right? So Nacho stays with the missionaries for a few years, and he becomes one of the promising kids. So 1885, the missionaries take him to Edinburgh, to Scotland.
Oh.
He was around 16 at this point in time. He comes to Scotland. He goes to school in Scotland. The school is Stewart's Melville. It's in Edinburgh. I've been there. I've seen the registers where he actually signed the original signature of Nacho in Edinburgh in 1885.
Oh, that must have been quite emotional.
I brought my daughters to come and see that. That's our history. That's their history too. Then he came back to Malawi 3 years later, end of 1887, and he would then, after a few years, be given charge of a mission station, Chiradzulu Mission. And this was the first time the British gave a mission station to be led by an African, by a Malawian. Nacho would lead that mission station up until 1920s. And when he retired, the missionaries bought him land right next to the Livingstone estate. And that set up for conflict between Nacho and Alexander Livingstone. And that conflict went on for years up until in his 70s, in 1945, Nacho decided enough is enough. As many people would do during the colonial era, he ended up taking his life because he was fed up with what the Livingstones were doing in the area. So this is my family story. This is my family history. This wrestling with mission and colonialism, right? That really shapes a great deal of the stories that we talk about when we gather together. I grew up with the awareness then of both mission
and
colonialism. But I knew I wanted to work in mission for a long time during my teen years.
How did you, at a young age, that your sense of mission was not tainted by your experience of colonialism? It's a miracle that you would choose to give your life to mission and yet have experienced the dark side of colonialism.
Yeah. That really comes out of the fact that I loved reading.
Okay.
So I read a lot of mission history, mission biographies. As a kid, I read a lot of the Bible as a kid. And right at that age, I began to realize that actually what happened at Magomero. And really what happened at Magomero is just a small example of what happened in many other parts of Africa. We were at Limuru, St. Paul's, for the past 2 days. And yes, I heard so many people say what happened at Magomero is something that happened at Limuru. Right? It happened in so many places around the continent. But I became aware of the fact that this is not really what we see in the Gospels, again, at a young age. So when I write Decolonizing Mission, I am making an argument that has stayed with me for a very long time. I would be invited to Switzerland at a young age to help somebody set up a school of ministry, a Bible school. Did that work for 3 years, had to learn German, to do that work well. And after 3 years, decided to actually go to school and study mission, especially around questions of how do you evangelize Westerners? Partly because growing up in Malawi, we were in a context of a revival, and there was a lot of people coming to Christ, churches being planted, churches growing, and I could not imagine living that context, that actually there are people in this world who have walked away from Christianity as a society. So when I landed in St. Gallen, Switzerland, and realized that actually these people, there are no Christians here, it just did not make sense. I couldn't believe it. Having seen what was happening in Africa, and then seeing the context of Switzerland, Germany, Austria, lands that were home to the Reformation, right? And seeing people had left Christianity en masse, made me begin to wonder about how do we then, as world Christians, for example, as African Christians experiencing this revival, how do we take the gospel back to the West? How do we evangelize Westerners? I would go to the UK to do a master's in missions, focusing on that question. And then immediately after the master's, move on to the US, to Minnesota, do a PhD, wrestling with the same question. But now, as I was doing the PhD, wrestling with that question, I realized that as an African, I had something to bring to the table. And I would then discover the world of African theology with the Kenyan theologian John Mbiti being one of my mentors. He would end up becoming a really close friend. I have fond memories of driving John Mbiti around the UK, taking him to Durham University for a lecture, or really driving from Oxford to Birmingham to find Ethiopian food, because on that day he said he wanted to eat at an Ethiopian restaurant. So we do this 90-minute drive from Oxford to Birmingham just to find him Ethiopian food. But it's really this discovery of African theology, African missiology, Africans thinking about mission that gave me the courage to begin to tell the story of mission from what I call the underbelly of empire. A mission discourse from the colonized, a missiology of the colonized. How do the colonized think and talk about mission? Now, attached to that is the fact that, of course, in most cases, the colonized become colonizers, right?
Okay.
But when we begin to think about mission seriously, and we ought to find ways to do mission differently. We cannot follow that model. We cannot, especially at this time when Africans are becoming really involved in mission, we cannot do mission as colonization anymore. We need to find new ways of doing that. And that's the argument I make in the book.
While you were taking your PhD, you lived in Minneapolis.
Yes.
The exact place where we had the killings of George Floyd and recently.
Yes. I lived.
How did that shape? I mean, it seems as if God just is placing you at hotbeds of all this conflict.
It feels so random that a Malawian would end up in the backyard of where George Floyd was killed. And that the people that I discipled when I was in St. Paul, Minneapolis, I planted a church in St. Paul. And the people that I worked with in that church would be neighbors living in the same neighborhood with George Floyd. Right? But
would you help us? Because I think for us here in Africa, I know we do have our own understanding of colonialism and our thinking about the experience that African Americans have gone through seems to be a different
Yes.
experience that is a bit far-fetched. Now, for you coming in, having seen the other side of colonialism, moving across the Atlantic, and now you see a different shade of the racism. How do you tie your head around what's really happening? How does that shape you?
I mean, in a nutshell, after living in the US for 7 years, I decided I can't live here anymore. I had to leave.
Oh.
Because the life of a black person in the US, a typical black person in the US, has too many limitations. The world is so the world is so small. There are too many boundaries that they can't cross, that they shouldn't cross. I know when we see African Americans in African Americans in the movies, on social media, even when we see African migrants in America on social media, they paint a picture of a world where life is always good. In my experience, having made a conscious attempt to connect with African Americans, it was so different. I felt, as an African, I felt lucky enough that I could go in there, have that experience. I was in the US during Obama's presidency.
Oh,
right.
That's another interesting.
I do remember vividly when Obama won the elections. I was in a room full of my white and black American friends in Minnesota, and everybody was in tears. They could not believe that this has happened, right? And then people began to talk about we are living in post-racial America, but immediately begin to see the backlash. The backlash that's led us to the place that we are at now. All right? That, I mean, I think in my estimation, we have a very unqualified man leading the country at the moment. But it's a backlash to why do we have that black man in the White House?
Wow.
Right? And so you see that, you experience that. I mean, my interactions with the police in the United States. I'll tell you a story. I hope I can tell it as safely as possible. We land in the US as international students, and we have to go through orientation as Africans. And the people who give us orientation tell us, they say, you Africans, you need to realize you're in the United States. This is how you behave. Right? You have to, when the police stop you, this is how you behave. This is how you talk to them. Because we understand that you will not understand that you are in a different context. Part of orientation. Wow. You will experience racism here that you have never seen before. And therefore, this is how you behave. Right? And so, living with that for a few years, I said, no, I can't do this anymore. Now, lucky enough, I can come back to Africa. Right? I could go back to some other parts of the world. My African American friends are stuck. Most of them, that's home. Right? They cannot simply pack up and go somewhere else. All right? And so that's the word of George Floyd. That's the word of Renee Good, who was killed 2 weeks ago. It's you need to be able to live in a world without being affected by things like racism to be happy in America. You need to find a way to train your mind to ignore racism, and then you'll be all right. There's good houses, good big houses, big cars, big roads, good food. But if racism affects you, you will struggle.
Oh, that's very great to learn about your great heritage from your great grandfather Nashon. And this kind of just brings you into a very great tension of having embraced mission, even though you have experienced and your people have experienced the blunt side of colonialism. How do you hold that in your heart? And how did you end up living with the British? I mean, that's quite ironical that you would really embrace mission as a way of life.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, growing up with the stories that I grew up with Malawi in Malawi, and having a sense of a call to mission at a young age, that sort of gave me a chance to process the stories. On the one hand, as an African Christian, who probably at a very young age understood what Jesus was doing in the context of the Roman Empire. And that Jesus was not part of the empire. He was subject. He lived in the empire, but his agenda, the agenda of the kingdom, was totally different, probably opposite to the agenda of the empire. And in seeing, again, going back to look for, in seeing that he is intentional about doing good to the people who have been harmed by empires, right? And that really allowed me to feel like, yes, of course, Jesus sees me, sees the colonized, right? And then immediately, again at a young age, allowed me to begin to think about how can we share the good news of Jesus without empires? How can we share the good news of Jesus without colonizing people? And immediately I began, I remember at a very young age, to deconstruct David Livingstone's missiology of the three C's: Christianity, commerce, and civilization. And to begin to realize that actually when Jesus says to the Galileans, go and make disciples from me, he's not saying go and civilize them. He's simply saying go and make disciples from me. And he's saying this to Galileans, to a colonized people, without giving them any imperial powers at all. He doesn't take them to Rome and then send them to go and make disciples. He sends them as colonized people. Yes, in the context of empire. Yes, they will use some of the things that empires make possible. This was the time of Pax Romana, the Roman peace, where migration was a big thing, right? Such that possibly when Jesus says, go and make disciples from me, really what he's saying is, as you migrate, as you move up and down the empire, make disciples from me. And so I was able to begin to deconstruct mission and colonialism at a young age. Now my training in missions, both experiences in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, before moving to the UK for my master's and moving to the US for the PhD, all that allowed me to see that actually it's possible to do mission without empires. And that actually possibly mission works better when it's done without imperial powers. Right? And having the experiences that I had in the US, experiencing the challenges of living in the US as a Black African who is really attentive to issues of empires, colonialism, racism, apartheid, and getting to the conclusion that, I don't want to subject myself to this anymore. I don't want to subject my children to this. So I moved back to the UK. This is not to say that there's no racism in the UK. There is racism. It's different, but there is racism. It felt a lot more plausible for me to say I'll raise up my kids in the UK than raising them up in the US. And so I moved back to the UK, ended up working for Church Mission Society, and moving to Liverpool Hope University, where I taught for some time. And then I got involved with Global Connections, which is a network organization of mission agencies in the UK. And again, going in these spaces as an African aware of issues of colonialism and racism, and really realizing actually we need to have this conversation about colonialism and mission, and then decided actually the best place to do that is not at Global Connections. So I moved back to CMS.
Okay.
All that I had worked for back in 2015, moved back to CMS in part-time 2021 and full-time 2024. And now at CMS, I lead what we call the Acts 11 project, which is the Center for, in common language, the Center for Mission and Migration Research.
Okay.
So we are really invested in the conversation around mission and migration, because in the Western mind, generally speaking, migration is a problem to be fixed. And it's a problem because it's the migration of black and brown people to the West.
Yeah.
When Westerners go to other parts of the world, they don't think of themselves as migrants. Right? So migration really is an issue of how do we respond to the black and brown people that are coming into our countries. And because Westerners don't think of themselves as people who migrate, as migrants, they don't really naturally see the connection between mission and migration. Right? Mission and migration, as I argued earlier, Jehu Hansi has made it clear. 2,000 years of Christian migrants taking the gospel to other parts of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole European story of mission, 1800s, 22 million Britons leave Britain to go and live in the empire. 22 million, that's a
22
very
million.
Big number. Altogether in Europe, probably talking about 60, 70, 80 million. At least 20% of Europe's population migrated in the 1800s.
Wow.
Right? And these are European Christians migrating with their Christianity to all parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I do think that is what makes possible world Christianity that we talk about today.
Oh, great.
Right? And so at the Acts 11 project, we are about this conversation. How do we create space where people can begin to understand migration differently from a missional lens? And actually, really, that is our wake of decolonizing mission.
Oh.
If we can get people to begin to see that Christian migrants are people that God is using in mission around the world, we have broken down one of the greatest barriers in mission.